They don't give you a handbook when your mom or dad isn't safe to live alone any longer. This is what a family member recently said to me. So I thought, let's do an episode about some of the struggles families have shared with us over the years when they know mom or dad just isn't safe at home. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn. And while a complete handbook would be way more involved than this podcast episode, and probably isn't even possible, I'm going to share insights from families just like yours to hopefully help make your journey a little more doable. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Senior Living, a podcast for sons, daughters, grandkids, spouses, and all caregivers who suddenly find themselves tangled in the search for senior living and care. If you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and check out our doable download in today's show notes for a printable summary of the show and a bonus tip. You're listening to our doable tips, short answers to your questions. Don't see your question listed? Send us a note. Then don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an answer. Hi, and welcome to the show. I think one of the things that makes a complete handbook a little difficult is that every family's journey is so unique. We're unique individuals with different dreams, fears, goals, and frustrations, not to mention healthcare needs. That said, I do have a handbook that I'm working on for you, but I'm going to call it Doable Tips because, first of all, I think tips sounds a little less overwhelming, and many of the tips come from other families who have been on this journey. And even though I'm certain with this episode or a book of tips that I won't get close to all of your concerns or questions, my hope is that it will spark an idea or solution or just help you feel better about what you're struggling with. Now, if you work in senior living, I want to take a moment to speak directly to you because I hope that by listening in, you'll gain a deeper understanding of what families are facing and then take that knowledge back to raise the bar in our industry. And I already know you are because you're telling me. So keep reaching out. I love to hear how the show is helping you help other families. My goal has always been to share information about the senior living industry because we're all most likely going to be there someday. We're going to need this handbook at some point. And you really do need one. There are so many variables to the industry, so much to learn. It's something you can't even Google because we have our own language in senior living and care. And most of the time, you aren't really looking into senior living and care until you're forced to, with what is usually or almost usually a crisis. And let's face it, you're very busy. Learning about senior living and care is not in your Audible wish list. So, in this episode, I'm going to give you some big picture tips and some practical ones while sharing real concerns from real families. So, let's jump right in. We've had some really great guests on the show over the years. We've had families sharing their personal stories and professionals sharing great advice. And my very first tip toward your personal handbook is to surround yourself with great resources. I think caregiving in general has been something we just didn't talk about until fairly recently. Many families, and maybe this is even you, tell me that they don't even see themselves as a caregiver. They tell me that, well, that's my mom, my dad, grandma, fill in the blank. I'm supposed to be helping them. It's just what families do. I'd be a bad son if I didn't help my mom. I'd be a bad friend if I didn't help my neighbor. And I get it. I get feeling that way. And I also know that many families don't have a choice. But by not thinking of yourself as a caregiver, it's likely you won't gravitate toward caregiving resources. By not thinking of yourself as a caregiver, you're likely tempted to tough it out until you reach your breaking point. And I know that because almost every family I've helped over the years only called when they had reached that point. So I want to challenge you to be both. Be the daughter, the granddaughter, brother, or son, but also know that you are doing one of the hardest jobs. And it's absolutely okay to seek out those resources and to ask for help. It does not lessen your role as son or daughter to call yourself caregiver. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, we don't have the money to hire help or to move mom to assisted living, or I don't trust anyone else to be with my dad. And I completely understand. And my hope is that you will at least seek out online resources or support groups. Share your story on Instagram or Facebook. There is a growing online caregiving community, and I'm certain you'll be able to find one that fits your need. And here are a few of my favorites. Social media influencer Carrie Alberts, AKA Dementia Darling, advocating for dementia caregivers. And soon she'll be advocating for all caregivers with her new podcast. She brings a light and joy and place to vent. And I know you need to vent. Melissa Fritz. She has a PBS North documentary following families on their journey from family dynamics to making the decision to move to assisted living or memory care, and then through the process of touring communities. It's a great show. And I'll put a link in show notes to these and other really great resources that I love. So I encourage you to follow that group on Instagram, subscribe to the podcast, and that's a great reminder if you haven't subscribed to this one yet. Ask your doctor, your coworkers, neighbors, and friends for their favorite resources for caregivers because you are a caregiver. Okay, now that we have that one out of the way, I feel like that's a big one. Here are some of the questions and obstacles families just like you have shared with us when their loved one is no longer safe at home. How am I supposed to do anything to help my dad when my brother and I totally disagree about him even needing help? My mom says she's fine and doesn't need any of my help. She has no idea that us kids bringing her food and setting up her pill box every week and taking her to her doctor's appointments is help. My dad made my brother promise to never move him out of his home. And now, even though he's fallen twice, my brother won't even talk about moving dad or getting him some in home care. My mom has memory loss, but she doesn't know it. And I'm literally losing sleep because I'm so worried about her living alone. My sisters and I are taking shifts around the clock to take care of my dad. And it's just getting to be too much. I can't even keep up with all the texts. Mom had a breakthrough, admitted she cannot do it alone. Dad stole the car yesterday, and thankfully, everything was okay. And the list goes on and on. In my experience, there are usually a few common categories of concerns, and we heard these in some of these examples: safety, refusing care or any help at all, even from you. And then there's the category of finances. Either there aren't enough or your loved one refuses to spend their money. I want to pause here before I get to my next tip because safety is the top concern that families report. So I just want to be very, very clear. If there is an immediate health concern or safety concern, do not feel bad about calling 911 if you think it's an emergency. And don't feel bad about calling your loved one's doctor, calling adult protective services in your area, or enlisting the help of neighbors. If you're concerned, there's probably a good reason. And caregiving means the roles have shifted. And yes, your loved one has the right to refuse care, but at least by reaching out, you'll know that you're doing everything you can to advocate for them. Okay, on to my second tip for your handbook. Start your research now. As soon as you start to worry, The minute that you start to worry, I'm going to say it again, start your research. Do not wait for a crisis. From in home care to senior living communities and adult family homes to getting to know your loved ones, neighbors, and friends just a little better. There are so many options, and starting your research is going to mean something different for everyone. Now, if you're the one who sees that help is needed, you might be thinking that the first step would be to try to convince everyone, including your mom or dad, that they need help or that moving to a senior living community has to happen. I believe that having these conversations is almost like asking for permission, getting that buy in. And it kind of is. But here's what some families did instead. We toured before telling my mom, and we found a great place that we knew she would love. Then we waited for the community's summer luau, roasted pig and all. We took mom there, and not only did she have fun, but she knew several people there from church. She didn't move right away, but it started the conversation, and we had a plan in case we needed something fast. With another family, it was a car show. Another, Oktoberfest. Community events are an amazing way to introduce your mom or dad to the community. Fear of change is one of those factors that makes this all so hard. So, finding something that's in the area you want and matches your mom or dad's style, then visiting during those events or for a meal can really help open up the possibility of a move. And it's also really fun. If you haven't been to these events, they are a lot of fun. Now, here's a pro tip: look for communities near the church your loved one attends or where they spend time shopping or going to get their hair done or to the Eagles Club or the VFW. Most people want to live where they're familiar. And this will not only help your mom or dad feel comfortable, but it increases their chance of seeing those familiar faces. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's all really great, but these options have to fit the budget. And this is what we hear from families about money. My parents have plenty of money, but my mom refuses to pay more than what she thinks she should, which is way less than what it's going to cost. If my dad ever did agree to move in somewhere or hire in home care, there's no way we could tell him how much it costs. We'd have to lie. The house is paid off. So, right now, there aren't many bills, and my mom has been frugal her entire life. She will freak out over those prices. My parents keep saying they don't want to spend our inheritance. There are so many variables when it comes to finances. Like I said at the top of the show, it would be almost impossible to write a handbook that would apply to every single situation. But starting your research early can help you build your loved one's plan for the future. And starting your research early is going to help you find government programs, community programs, and just to get a lay of the land for the communities that are maybe more affordable and that your loved one would feel more comfortable in. Okay, on to some practical tips. And these, I think, do apply to everyone's situation. Create a 1 to 2 page fact sheet about your loved one. Now, I know that's going to sound a little silly. It's going to feel like you're writing a book, but I want you to include history and important facts. Where were they born? Where did they live? Where did they travel? Were they married, divorced, siblings, likes, dislikes, careers, hobbies, and adjectives that describe them and events that shaped them? These are all things that are going to not only help guide you when you're trying to look for that perfect match, but this is also really valuable information for any future caregivers or the community where they're going to live. Second, I want you to gather all financial documents. This includes accounts and passwords. Then gather healthcare information, including health history, medications, MyChart passwords, advanced directives, which this is whether your loved one wants to be resuscitated, then wills and trusts, military documents. And yes, I hear exactly what you're thinking. Most of these things are going to require a conversation. But this conversation could be as simple as, hey, mom, I just want to make sure I have these things in place in case something happens to you and you can't tell us where all these things are. And this is usually a much easier conversation. And if you start early, you won't have to jump right into, you need help, which isn't usually well received. Gathering all of this information before there's a crisis is going to make your life so much easier in the event of an emergency. And again, it's going to be handy pre-emergency information for filling out paperwork for in-home care or moving to a senior living community. So, how do you feel right now? Do you feel like you've got the makings of a handbook? Well, I hope that you feel that way and that this doesn't make things more overwhelming. Okay, to sum it up, surround yourself with great resources. Start your research now and gather all important information. And you'll have the beginning of a great handbook that I hope will make your journey a little more doable. Today's episode is brought to you by ClearPath Senior Living Solutions. ClearPath helps families find assisted living, memory care, and other resources. Find our contact information in today's show notes. Check out this episode's doable download in show notes for details, including industry terms and definitions we discussed, as well as a bonus tip from our guest. Have questions or your own tips to share? Leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, make it doable.